Good morning, Reptilians. Welcome back to my channel. Before we get into the video, I just wanted to point out that I was not kidding. I absolutely love those vines from last week's video, and thank you so much again to Lindsay for reaching out to me and telling me where she got them. They're wonderful. I love them so much. It came with all of these. There's 3 strands here and all of these vines. I will leave the link for those down below if you are interested. But yeah, thank you. Anyways, on to the video. This week we are doing a video that is very similar to one I did a little while back about ball python body language, but this week we're going to be talking about leopard geckos. Leopard geckos are very animated lizards, and so I thought that they'd be perfect to do a leopard gecko body language video on. I'm not going to be talking about any kind of breeding behaviors because I'm not a breeder and I don't feel confident in my ability to talk about those kinds of behaviors. So we're just going to be talking about normal everyday behaviors of leopard geckos. Before we get started, this video is sponsored by iheartgeckos, so make sure you stay until the end of the video to find out more about this amazing company. Let's get started. So before we get into more specific behaviors, we're going to talk about an overall happy, healthy leopard gecko and what that should look like. Leopard geckos are crepuscular animals, which means that they are most active during the dawn and dusk. So they should be sleeping during the day. They should also be active during the dawn and dusk. Now, I know that sometimes leopard geckos, especially babies, or if a leopard gecko is new to you, sometimes they will just be active during the night. They almost act like nocturnal animals, and that is perfectly okay too, but they should be sleeping all day. In addition, when they are active, they should be active. They should be moving from their hot to their cold side. They should be exploring and hunting and digging. If you have a loose substrate, they should be doing things. They should also be eating regularly and pooping regularly. They normally will always poop in the same spot, which is awesome. They are very clean animals. They should also be shedding regularly. A lot of times they will eat their own shed. Again, super cool. They clean it up for you and they get nutrients from it when they eat it. And generally they're going to be pretty easy to handle. Now, all reptiles, all leopard geckos are going to have their own personality, so every now and then you get one that just flat out does not want to be handled ever. But for the most part, if your leopard gecko was at one point comfortable being handled, it shouldn't suddenly become aggressive and defensive on you. Now let's move on to probably the reason you clicked on this video, more specific behaviors. First, let's talk about screaming. Leopard geckos, like many other geckos, possess the ability to vocalize, and a lot of times this is something that will be seen especially with babies or very timid geckos. This screaming usually occurs if you get too close to them or if you try to pick them up, basically when you put them in a situation that they don't want to be in. This is not something that all leopard geckos will do. When I got Percy and she was a baby, she never vocalized at all. I've actually never heard her vocalize in the years that I've had her. But Winter, on the other hand, came from a not so good situation, and whenever I would put my hand to the tank, he would scream. When I would pick him up, he would scream and pee on me. This just means that they're very stressed out and they are not used to being handled and they're scared, so that's their way of scaring off an enemy that is trying to grab them, and it works. Every time Winter would scream at me, I would jump. It was scary, it's unexpected, it works. And if you've gone ahead and picked them up anyway, which I don't suggest because they are already very stressed out at that point. If you've gone ahead and picked them up anyway, then they may continue to squeak and chirp in your hand as opposed to just a steady scream, which again is letting you know that they are incredibly stressed out. On to the next defensive behavior, let's talk about slow tail waving. In the wild, they would use that as a way to distract predators or to distract other leopard geckos for a couple of different reasons. Number one could be that they are, again, defensive, and if they are defensive and they are slow tail wagging, a lot of times they will also stand stout, and that tail is straight up, and that's just making them look bigger and more intimidating to predators. So if your leopard gecko is doing this to you, that just means don't mess with me. Messing with them while they are in this stance could very quickly lead to you getting bit, so this is another thing that you want to leave them alone if they are doing this and it is directed at you. Not encouraging you to continue messing with them when they are this defensive, but if you do get bit by a leopard gecko, it feels almost like sandpaper or brick just lightly brushing on your finger. It doesn't hurt at all, so it's not something that you should be scared of, just something that you should be be aware of. But if that slow tail movement isn't directed at you and they are walking around their tank doing it, that probably means that they're hunting. So there may be a cricket or a dubia roach, worm, whatever in their tank, and that is what they are going after. If they are doing that and it's not directed at you, then you should be fine. I still wouldn't pick them up at that point though, because they are trying to get food and they're very focused. But if it's not directed at you, most likely they are hunting. On to quick tail movements. This is usually following that slow tail movement, and the tips of their tail will kind of start to flicker really fast. This just means they're excited. Usually, if they were hunting, they will start to flick that tail in order to catch their prey. In the wild, they are flicking that tail to distract whatever bug they are about to eat so that it isn't paying attention to their face and is now paying attention to their tail, and they can snatch that bug up. Usually, at the time when they do start doing that very quick tail flip, they have stopped moving, or if they are moving very, very slowly, again, so that all the attention is to the tail and not to their head where they're about to snatch up that bug, which is super cool and super adorable to watch. If your leopard gecko is eating and you notice that they kind of stick their neck out and sway it back and forth, usually that means that they are having a hard time swallowing whatever it is that they were eating. They may stick their head straight out, they may look up and do it, but that's basically just their way of helping them swallow. It doesn't mean that they're choking, it just means that that prey item was a little too big for them, and moving their head back and forth like that actually helps to wiggle that food item down into their throats. So if this is something that happens rarely, then it's fine. If this is something that's happening every single time your leopard gecko is eating, then you probably need to consider getting a smaller food item for them, because the one that you are feeding might be a little too big. Glass surfing. Glass surfing is very common in leopard geckos. A lot of times leopard geckos just don't understand the glass, so if they are walking around and exploring and being active and they are glass surfing while they're doing that, that is just kind of part of their exploration, and it's not something that you should worry about. Again, back to my leopard geckos, Percy glass surfs all the time when she wants out of her tank. So if you've watched my channel for a while, you know that she loves getting out. I actually planned on having her out today while I was recording this, and she started to shed, so she is kind of preoccupied right now. But when she wants out of her tank, she will just glass surf over and over and over until I take her out. So that may be something to look into. If your leopard gecko is glass surfing a lot, they might just want out of their tank to explore a bigger area. But glass surfing could also mean that there is a bigger problem. If your tank is too small, your leopard gecko might glass surf a lot. So the very minimum size for an adult leopard gecko is a 20-gallon long. If you have an adult leopard gecko in, let's say, a 10-gallon and they're glass surfing all the time, that just means that they need more room. They need a bigger tank. It also could mean that they don't have enough enrichment. They're bored. Leopard geckos need things to do. They need fake plants. They need places to climb. They love to climb. If at all possible, and if you are comfortable with it, having somewhere to dig is going to give them something to do. Just make sure that the substrate that you use is safe, but they need something to do, or else they get really bored really quickly, and that could lead to glass surfing. If your leopard gecko is never leaving their hot side or never leaving their cool side, that could mean that you should check your temperatures. If they never ever leave their hot side, you should check that temperature, and it should be at least 90 degrees and maybe even a couple of degrees hotter depending on your leopard gecko and what they like. If they are always staying on their cold side, then their hot side is probably too hot and it needs to be adjusted down a couple of degrees. Please make sure you are using a thermostat with your heating pad to ensure that the temperature is correct. Heat pads do not self-regulate. That means that if you do not have that heat pad connected to a thermostat, it could be 140 degrees right there, and obviously that is way too hot for leopard geckos. Just keep in mind that they are a crepuscular species, so if they are sleeping all day on their hot side or all day in their cold side, that is completely normal. They're sleeping. This mostly just applies to their active hours and them not coming out from those hides when they normally should be active. Digging. If you have a loose substrate in your enclosure, then it is very normal for leopard geckos to dig. They love to dig. I do stress though, if you have a loose substrate in there, please make sure it is an appropriate and safe loose substrate for leopard geckos. Males and females will actually both dig. However, if you have a mature female and she is digging all the time, or she is digging in a spot where there is no loose substrate, she's just digging at tile or carpet or whatever, it could mean that she's gravid. If you have that loose loose substrate, then you're fine, you're good to go. But if you don't and you notice a lot of digging, then make sure that you provide them with a dig box of some sort so that they can lay their eggs. Fortunately, leopard geckos are usually not like bearded dragons, who will only lay their eggs if they are given the appropriate dig box. A lot of times if they're not given a dig box, leopard geckos will find somewhere to lay those eggs. They will lay them in their poop spot or in their hide, or especially if you have a moist hide, which you should for a leopard gecko, they will go in there and lay them, but provide them with that if you have a mature female, as it'll make life easier on her. Licking. Leopard geckos, like bearded dragons, lick everything. And this is 100% normal. This is also one of the reasons why calcium sand is not good for them, because they will just lick it because that's what they do. The reason they lick everything is because leopard geckos, like other reptiles, have something called the Jacobson's organ. And what that does is it is a sensory part of their mouth that allows them to lick things and almost smell what that item is. And one of the huge roles that the Jacobson's organ plays is it tells the leopard gecko if what it is licking is alive or not. So that is how they explore their environment and get a feel for their environment, and that is how they know what is food and what isn't food. So if you watch your leopard gecko walk around their tank and they're licking everything, it is completely normal, and most likely when you take them out, they are going to lick your hand to explore you. Tail loss. Leopard geckos possess the ability to drop their tails, to lose their tails. It's usually not done as easy as, say, a crested gecko that can just drop it at will. Usually it is something that is done in situations of extreme stress. So if your leopard gecko gets their tail caught on something, if they are shedding and pulling off their shed with their teeth and they cut that circulation off, which most likely is what happened to Percy's tail, if you or a child or someone pulls on that tail, those sorts of things are things that would cause them to drop the tail because they think that there is a danger, they think that a predator is trying to get them, and they drop that tail in order to trick the predator into attacking the tail and not their head. That is why most leopard geckos' tails and heads look very similar with the patterns and the colors. If this happens, don't worry, it will grow back. It'll look a little different, but it will grow back. The only thing that I would suggest in this situation is to take any loose substrate out. If they have any kind of loose substrate in their tank, put them on tile or paper towels or something that's going to be easy to clean, because as that tail is growing back, it is an open wound and you don't want dirt and debris and things getting in there and possibly causing an infection. The risk of infection with a lost tail isn't very high. It is a natural behavior that they have. It's something that they do in the wild where it's very dirty. However, I always like to be safe and advise to keep that tank clean in that situation just in case. This isn't really body language, but it is something that happens with leopard gecko, so I thought I wanted to cover it, and that is not eating. Not eating could mean that something is wrong, or it could be completely normal. The most concerning of the things is parasites. Anytime your leopard gecko hasn't eaten for an extended period of time, I always suggest taking in a stool sample into a local vet to have it tested for parasites, just to be sure. However, it could be something super simple. Leopard geckos, like many reptiles, can get bored of eating the same foods over and over again, and if that happens, they're gonna stop eating until you give them something different. If it is winter time and your leopard gecko has stopped eating, then the ambient temperature in that tank might have fallen, sending them into brumation. Brumation isn't as common in leopard geckos as it is in something like bearded dragons, but it does still happen. If you suspect that your leopard gecko is going into brumation, again, I always suggest sending in a stool sample so that they can be tested for parasites, because a brumating animal with parasites means that those parasite numbers are going to get out of control and it can become a very dangerous situation very quickly for your animal. Another interesting reason that leopard geckos might stop eating is something that I like to call leopard gecko puberty. Both of my leopard geckos went through this. Basically, when your leopard gecko reaches maturity, they kind of panic. They get stressed out. They don't know what's happening with their bodies, and because of that stress, they don't want to eat. With both of my leopard geckos, when this happened, the very first thing that I did was took a stool sample into the vet to get it tested for parasites. Both of them, when it happened, came back clean. With each leopard gecko, they went a little over 2 months without eating anything, and it is scary. I am not a vet, and I am not advising that you do this, But the advice that was given to me after they tested negative for parasites was to basically stop feeding them at all for 10 to 14 days. Like, completely take the bowl out, do not offer any food at all in that tank, and then once those days were up, give them something new or something that you know that they love. So with both of mine, that was waxworms. They love waxworms, and each time it worked perfectly. So again, not a vet. I am not giving medical advice. That is just something that my vet told me to do when my leopard geckos went through their leopard gecko puberty. And the last thing that we're going to touch on is Enigma Syndrome. The reason that this is in a body language video is because a lot of knowing if your leopard gecko has Enigma Syndrome is going to be body language. Enigma Syndrome is basically a genetic disorder that is bred through the Enigma gene. Luckily, this morph isn't widely bred anymore. The vast majority of breeders stopped breeding them, but there are a few out there that still do. So it's very important to know the signs, and that way you can look into getting help. A couple of things to look for with this is going to be stargazing, which is when your animal is sitting up and they just will arch their entire back and look directly up at the stars, and they'll do it over and over. This isn't just something that they do if they're stretching. You'll notice that this is something that happens often. They have problems with coordination, with walking, with aim. You may put a bowl of worms in there or crickets in that tank, and they go to attack it and they completely miss over and over and over again. They may walk in circles or have seizures or do something called a death roll if you go to pick them up, where literally they will roll over because they're so stressed out. The thing with Enigma Syndrome is that these animals cannot handle stress. Stress will make all of these things worse. And a lot of these leopard geckos are going to need very special care. They have to be hand fed. They have to be set up in enclosures very specifically to not cause them stress. And so it's very important to know if your leopard gecko has this. If you do suspect that your leopard gecko has Enigma Syndrome, I highly suggest looking into Jessica's Animal Friends here on YouTube, who has multiple rescued leopard geckos with Enigma Syndrome, and she deals with them. She knows how to handle them. I would highly suggest her videos if you think that your animal may have this and you are looking for help with that animal. But that is it for this week's video. Hopefully this was helpful, especially if you just got your leopard gecko and you're trying to figure out what all of those animations mean, or if you've had your gecko for a while and he's doing something new. Hopefully this helped. As I said at the beginning of this video is sponsored by iheartgeckos. iheartgeckos makes awesome conversion kits for arboreal animals. What these conversion kits do is allow you to take any old aquarium that you may have laying around and turn it into a vertical standing front opening tank for an arboreal creature. These are awesome. They literally take a couple of minutes to install. You just take some aquarium safe silicone and silicone this in, and you have a very affordable front opening tank. You guys know that I've used iheartgeckos products for a while, even before they started sponsoring me, so I 1000% stand behind iheartgeckos and their products. If you decide to go ahead and order one of those, make sure to leave Elle's Reptiles in the How Did You Hear About Us box at iheartgeckos.com. Thank you so much to iheartgeckos for sponsoring this video. As always, if you have not already, please feel free to follow me on my other socials and like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications every single time I put out a new video, which is every Sunday. Before we get to the Instagram shout out, I did want to say, by popular demand of you guys, we will now be doing an Instagram shout out and a subscriber shout out every week. So the YouTube subscriber shout out is going to be just me going to last week's video and shouting out someone from the comment section. Most likely it's going to be people that I know are super active on the channel and that have been super active on the channel, so make sure you are commenting down below. And yeah, this week's Instagram shout out goes to Juice Gaming 9861 for following me on Instagram and going through and liking a whole bunch of my stuff. And the very first subscriber shout out goes to King K, who is always commenting on the videos and he's always super active, so thank you guys so much for that. You are the bee's knees. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye. All right, take two, because none of that sound recorded. Sometimes they will just... Now let's move. Why? Why are you not focusing on me? There's my face right there. But glass surfing can mean that there is another... Okay, good talk. A lot of times if they are not given a... There's no way of this behind on my Instagram shoutouts. Oh, I just need to make an album for my Instagram screenshots. There we go. Yes.